Commander Vextal of the Krillian Empire sat in his observation chamber, his three-fingered hands drumming against the polished obsidian console in a rhythm that suggested deep irritation. His fourth eye, the one on the back of his head, kept swiveling toward the chrono display, watching the seconds tick by with painful slowness. 47 standard cycles, he muttered, his mandibles clicking in frustration. 47 cycles of this assignment and they send me to observe humans. The word tasted strange in his mouth. Humans. They were a recent addition to the Galactic Federation, having stumbled into the wider universe only 3 generations ago. By all logical metrics, they should have been insignificant. Their technology was primitive compared to the Krillian Empire. Their lifespans were laughably short. Their planet was a backwater water world with a gravity that made most species uncomfortable. And yet they'd managed to carve out a place for themselves in the Federation through sheer, inexplicable stubbornness. They'd won wars they had no business winning. They'd negotiated treaties that favored them despite having no diplomatic leverage. They'd built alliances with species that had previously refused to speak to one another. Commander Vextal found it deeply unsettling. "Commander," a voice chimed from the communications array. It was his aide, Lieutenant T-Car, whose voice carried that particular tone of forced patience that Vextal had come to recognize. "Your transport to Earth is ready. The human military installation has confirmed your visit." Vextal sighed, a sound that produced a low whistle through his breathing spiracles. "Lieutenant, remind me why I agreed to this." "Because High Command believes that understanding human military doctrine is essential for continued diplomatic relations, and because you lost the bet." "That was a game of chance. It should not have counted." "The bet was clearly stated, Commander. If you lost at cards, you would take the next observation assignment. The terms were documented." Vextal's mandibles clicked faster. He had indeed lost the bet. Badly. Admiral Kavarth had shown no mercy, and now Vextal was being sent to observe human military training for a period of 20 of their days. "Fine," he said, rising from his chair with all the enthusiasm of a creature heading to its own execution. "Prepare the diplomatic vessel, and ensure that all translation matrices are functioning properly. I refuse to be caught in another misunderstanding like on the last assignment." He still shuddered thinking about the Vrkel incident. 3 ships had been destroyed because of a translation error regarding the word beverage. The journey to Earth took 3 standard days. Vextal spent most of it reviewing the briefing materials, which grew increasingly disturbing the more he read. Human military history was chaotic. That was the only word for it. They'd been fighting each other for literally thousands of years. They developed weapons of mass destruction and actually used them, on themselves, multiple times. "By the eternal void," Vextal whispered, reading about the nuclear armament era. "They had enough firepower to destroy their own planet multiple times over, and they just kept building more." "That is correct, Commander," T-Car responded from the communications console. "The humans refer to this period as the Cold War." Cold? There was nothing cold about it. They were threatening mutual annihilation. "Yes, Commander, but they never actually pressed the button." Vextal stared at the screen, watching footage of human military parades. They marched in perfect synchronization, their movements precise and disciplined. Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, kinetic projectiles that fired physical ammunition, but their numbers were staggering. "What is this?" he asked, pointing to a segment showing humans in formation, their faces painted with colored patterns. "That is what they call camouflage, Commander. It helps them blend into their environment." Vextal watched as a human soldier disappeared into a forested area, becoming nearly invisible. His fourth eye widened in surprise. "Impressive," he admitted, "but surely their ship-to-ship combat capabilities are lacking." "Not exactly, Commander. They've developed something they call kinetic bombardment. They drop large metal objects from orbit. The resulting impact is significant. Vextel pulled up the data. His mandibles went slack. By the spire, he breathed. They're using rocks. They're literally throwing rocks at people from space. It is highly effective, Commander. One of their soldiers, a sergeant major, referred to it as precision archaeology. He said they were just redistributing geological formations for tactical purposes. Vextel closed the briefing files. I need to see this in person. There must be some explanation. These creatures cannot possibly be as terrifying as the data suggests. The transport vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere, and Vextel watched the planet unfold beneath him. Blue, so much blue. Water covered most of the surface, which explained why the humans had developed aquatic capabilities so extensively. But what caught his attention was the green. Vast expanses of it, broken occasionally by gray cities and winding rivers. The humans had spread across their entire planet, adapting to every environment from frozen poles to scorching deserts. How did they do that? He murmured. They don't have environmental adaptations. They don't have exoskeletons or thermal regulation systems. They're just flesh. Yet they thrive, Commander, Tikar observed. I have been reading their historical documents. They've survived ice ages, plagues, and multiple extinction-level events. They are remarkably resilient. The vessel banked and Vextel saw it. The military installation. It was massive, a complex of buildings and training grounds that sprawled across what appeared to be an entire valley. There were runways for atmospheric craft, parade grounds, and what looked like obstacle courses. And everywhere there were humans. They swarmed like insects, moving in organized patterns that suggested training and discipline. Vextel could see them running in formation, their movements synchronized. He could see them performing what appeared to be combat drills with weapons that glinted in the sunlight. Take us down, he ordered, and prepare my diplomatic escort. I want to make a good impression. The humans have assigned a liaison to you, Commander, a Colonel Johnson. Johnson, is that a rank or a name? Both, Commander. Humans use family names that are passed down through generations. Vextel filed this information away. Human naming conventions were yet another mystery he would need to unravel. The landing was smooth, and Vextel stepped out onto the tarmac with his full diplomatic regalia. He'd chosen his formal robes, deep purple with gold trim, and had polished his ceremonial armor until it gleamed. His 3 eyes, he'd closed the 4th, as it tended to make other species uncomfortable, swept across the landing area, cataloging everything. The humans who greeted him were interesting. There were 6 of them, all wearing identical uniforms in a shade of green that seemed designed to blend with the surrounding landscape. Their posture was rigid, their expressions carefully neutral. The one in front, who Vextel assumed was Colonel Johnson, stepped forward. Commander Vextel, the human said, his voice deep and resonant. Welcome to the United States Military Academy. I'm Colonel Marcus Johnson, your liaison for the duration of your visit. Vextel extended his primary manipulator, which the human shook firmly. The contact was brief, but felt like being gripped by a hydraulic press. You have a strong grip, Vextel observed. Thank you, Commander. We take physical conditioning seriously here. Vextel noticed that the other humans were watching him with undisguised curiosity. Their eyes tracked his movements, his 4 arms, his mandibles, everything. They were cataloging him the same way he was cataloging them. Your people are quite observant, he said. We're trained to be, sir. Attention to detail can mean the difference between life and death. Vextel found this statement oddly unsettling. These creatures thought about death constantly. It was woven into every aspect of their military doctrine. They trained for it, prepared for it, and apparently accepted it as an inevitable part of their existence. I look forward to observing your training methods, Vextel said, falling into step beside the colonel. The Federation has expressed great interest in understanding human military capabilities. Happy to oblige, Commander. We've prepared a full schedule of demonstrations and training exercises for you. As they walked toward the main complex, Vextel took in the details of the installation. The architecture was functional but not entirely without aesthetic consideration. There were statues of humans in various poses, some holding weapons, others in contemplative positions. There were plaques with names and dates, memorials to humans who had died. So many names, Vextel observed. Those are our fallen, Commander. We honor those who gave their lives in service to their country. And they keep dying. Unfortunately, yes. Conflict is a part of our nature, but we try to minimize casualties where possible. Vextel found this response deeply confusing. If conflict was part of their nature, why try to minimize it? The Krillian Empire had long since moved past such primitive impulses. Their conflicts were conducted through logic and diplomacy, with actual warfare reserved for extreme circumstances. But the humans seemed to embrace conflict. They trained for it constantly. They prepared for it as though it was an inevitable part of their existence. Your people seem to spend a great deal of time preparing for war, Vextel observed. Because we believe in being ready, Commander. In our history, the unprepared have suffered greatly. We prefer to be ready for anything. Anything. The colonel smiled, and Vextel noticed it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of someone who had seen things and was waiting to see how you would react. Anything, Commander. Now if you'll follow me, we'll begin your orientation. The first training exercise Vextel observed was physical conditioning. He watched from a viewing platform as a group of human recruits, young, barely out of adolescence by his estimation, ran through an obstacle course. The recruits are in their first week of training, Colonel Johnson explained. This is their first full day of physical conditioning. Vextel observed the recruits scrambling over walls, crawling through mud, and climbing ropes. Their movements were clumsy but determined. They fell. They got back up. They fell again. They got back up again. This is what you call training, Vextel asked, his mandibles clicking in amusement. They are falling a great deal. That's the point, Commander. We teach them to get back up. But surely there is a more efficient method. Neural conditioning, genetic modification, even basic physical augmentation would reduce the need for such primitive exercises. The colonel's smile returned. We tried that once. We found that nothing builds character like falling and getting back up. Vextel watched as one recruit, a female with reddish hair, reached the top of the rope climb. She was clearly exhausted, her muscles trembling with exertion. But she didn't stop. She continued upward until she reached the top, then slid down with a triumphant shout. A human custom, the colonel explained, noticing Vextel's confused expression, expressing their accomplishment by making noise at maximum volume. Yes, Commander, by making noise at maximum volume. The weapons training was next, and Vextel found it equally baffling. The recruits were divided into groups, each group assigned to a different weapons platform. There were kinetic projectile weapons, the kind he'd seen in the briefing materials. There were explosive devices. There were even primitive directed energy weapons that looked like they'd been cobbled together from spare parts. The recruits will be learning to field strip and reassemble their weapons, the colonel explained. They'll also be taught proper marksmanship techniques. Vextel watched as a recruit, a young male with close-cropped hair, attempted to reassemble a projectile weapon. His hands were shaking, presumably from the exertions of the obstacle course. He dropped a component, cursed under his breath, and began again. Your people have an interesting relationship with their weapons, Vextel observed. They treat them with reverence. We do, A weapon is a tool, but it's also a responsibility. Every soldier must understand their weapon intimately. It's a matter of trust. Trust. Trust that the weapon will function when needed. Trust that you understand it well enough to use it properly. Trust that you're prepared for what comes next. Vextal found this concept fascinating. The Krillian Empire had developed weapons that required no such intimacy. Their soldiers simply activated their weapons and pointed them in the general direction of the enemy. Individual proficiency was not required, as the weapons largely operated themselves. But humans insisted on personal mastery. They demanded that their soldiers understand every component of their weapons, could repair them in the field, and could use them effectively under any conditions. This is very inefficient, Vextal observed. Why not simply give your soldiers weapons that do the work for them? The colonel's smile flickered. Because, Commander, we've learned that soldiers who rely on technology tend to break when the technology fails, and technology always fails eventually. So we teach our soldiers to be capable without their technology. Vextal thought about this. He thought about the Krillian soldiers who would be helpless if their weapons failed. He thought about the Federation troops who relied so heavily on their advanced equipment. Then he watched as a human recruit, using nothing but a simple projectile weapon and basic training, hit a target at a distance that should have been impossible. Impressive, he admitted. Thank you, Commander, we think so. The food was. Vextal wasn't sure what the food was. He'd been assured that his dietary needs had been accommodated, but the meal in front of him was deeply suspicious. This is chicken, the colonel said, gesturing at a piece of meat on Vextal's plate. It's a common protein source on Earth. Vextal poked at the meat with his primary manipulator. It appears to have been cooked. Yes, Commander, we cook our food. Interesting. The Krillian Empire consumes all food in its natural state. Cooking destroys nutritional value. The colonel shrugged. We find it improves the flavor. Also, it kills pathogens. You'll find that humans take food safety very seriously. Vextal took a tentative bite. His mandibles worked for a moment, processing the flavor. Then his fourth eye opened involuntarily. This is acceptable, he admitted. The seasoning is unusual but not unpleasant. Thank you, Commander. The chef will be pleased to hear that. The other humans in the mess hall were watching them, their conversations dropping to murmurs. Vextal could feel their eyes on him, assessing, evaluating. He'd become accustomed to this treatment during his years of diplomatic service. I have a question, Colonel, Vextal said, setting down his utensils. About your military doctrine. Ask away, Commander. Your people seem to embrace sacrifice. You speak of your fallen with reverence. You train your soldiers to accept that they may die. Why? The colonel was quiet for a moment. Around them, the mess hall continued its low hum of conversation. Outside, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the parade ground. Because we believe in something greater than ourselves, Commander. We believe in protecting our families, our homes, our way of life. We believe that some things are worth dying for. But surely there are better ways. Technology could protect your families without requiring sacrifice. Drones could fight your wars. Automation could reduce casualties to near zero. The colonel's smile returned, but it was different now, softer. We tried that, Commander. We found that when we removed the human element from warfare, we lost something essential. We lost the understanding of what we were fighting for. We lost the connection to the people we were protecting. We lost ourselves. Vextal was about to respond when the incident occurred. It started with a crash. A recruit, clearly exhausted from training, had collapsed at one of the tables. His meal tray had gone flying, scattering food across the floor. The young human's face was pale, his breathing labored. Medic, someone shouted. We need a medic. The response was immediate. Humans rushed from all directions, converging on the fallen recruit. The colonel was on his feet instantly, his chair scraping back with a sound that cut through the chaos. "Clear the area," he barked. "Give him room." Vextel watched, fascinated, as the humans responded to the emergency. Their movements were practiced, coordinated. Someone ran for medical supplies. Someone else began checking the recruit's vital signs. A third human began directing the crowd, maintaining order in the chaos. The recruit regained consciousness after a few moments. He was disoriented, clearly confused about what had happened. The medic, a female with dark skin and calm eyes, knelt beside him. "You fainted, trooper," she said, her voice steady. "Probably dehydration. When did you last drink water?" The recruit blinked. I don't remember." "That's what I thought. Let's get you to the medical bay." As the recruit was helped to his feet and led away, Vextel turned to the colonel. "This happens frequently. More than we'd like. The training is demanding and recruits sometimes push themselves too far. But your response, it was so organized. You prepared for this eventuality." The colonel smiled. "We prepare for everything, Commander. As I said, we believe in being ready for anything." Later that evening, Vextel sat in his quarters, reviewing the day's observations. His recording device captured everything: the training exercises, the obstacle courses, the weapons demonstrations, and the incident at the mess hall. "Inefficient," he muttered, dictating his notes. "Their training methods are primitive and wasteful. They rely on physical conditioning that would be obsolete in the Federation. Their weapons are crude kinetic devices that require constant maintenance and individual proficiency." He paused, mandibles clicking as he considered his next words. And yet, their response to the medical incident was remarkably efficient. They demonstrated coordination and preparation that would be impressive even by Federation standards. Their soldiers show resilience and determination that cannot be easily replicated. There is something unexpected about them, something that defies logical analysis. He ended his recording and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the young recruit who had collapsed. The human had been surrounded by support within seconds. His comrades had responded not with panic but with purpose. They had clearly trained for such eventualities and executed their response with precision. "Interesting," Vextel murmured. "Very interesting." The graduation ceremony was something Vextel would never forget. He'd seen many ceremonies in his years of diplomatic service: coronations, military reviews, diplomatic receptions, but nothing had prepared him for a human graduation. The parade ground was immaculate, the grass trimmed to perfection. The cadets, fresh graduates he'd been told, marched in perfect synchronization. Their uniforms were pressed and polished. Their faces were proud and determined. "The graduating class is the culmination of years of training," Colonel Johnson explained. "They've earned the right to call themselves officers." Vextel watched as the humans marched past the viewing stand. Their movements were so precise, so synchronized, that they might have been a single organism moving as one. Their faces were flushed with exertion, but they didn't slow down, didn't falter, didn't stop. "Impressive," Vextel admitted. "Your people have a remarkable capacity for discipline." "Thank you, Commander. We consider discipline to be essential for success." There was a flyover by human atmospheric craft, 5 of them, flying in formation, trailing colored smoke that painted the sky. Vextel's fourth eye opened wide as he watched the display. "The pilots are showing off," the colonel said, smiling. "It's a traditional part of the ceremony. Your people engage in aerial acrobatics for ceremonial purposes." "We do. We also do it for entertainment. Humans enjoy displays of skill and precision." Vextel filed this information away. The humans seemed to enjoy everything: displays of skill, displays of power, displays of collective achievement. They celebrated their successes with enthusiasm that bordered on excessive. After the ceremony, Vextel was taken on a final tour of the facility. The colonel showed him the training grounds, the weapons vaults, and finally, the memorial hall. The memorial hall was a building of simple design, its walls covered with plaques and photographs. There were names, hundreds of them, stretching back through human history. "These are the graduates who died in service," the colonel explained. "The ones who gave their lives in defense of their nation." Vextel walked through the hall, reading the names, studying the faces. Each plaque told a story: a young human who had died far from home, a soldier who had fallen in battle, a leader who had sacrificed everything. "They were so young," Vextel observed. "Many of them were. War takes the young. But you continue to send them to war, knowing that they might not return." The colonel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was measured. "We send them because we believe in what we're fighting for, Commander. We send them because the alternative, not fighting, not protecting what matters, is worse. We honor their sacrifice by remembering them, by telling their stories, by ensuring that their lives mattered." Vextel looked at the faces in the photographs. They looked so human, so vulnerable. They had been young once, full of hope and dreams. They had trained and prepared and fought, and they had died. But their deaths had been meaningful. That was the difference. "We have nothing like this," Vextel admitted. "The Krillian Empire does not honor its fallen. We consider death to be a failure, an inefficiency to be avoided at all costs." "Then you're missing something, Commander. You're missing the understanding that some things are worth dying for." Vextel left the memorial hall in silence. His fourth eye had closed, as it always did when he was thinking. He didn't speak until they reached his quarters. "I think I understand now," he said. "Your people are not just soldiers. You are guardians, protectors. You fight not because you enjoy war, but because you believe in what you're protecting." "That's a fair assessment, Commander," the colonel said. "We fight because we must. We fight because the alternative is unacceptable. We fight because some things are worth defending." Vextel nodded slowly. "I will include this in my report. The human military is primitive by Federation standards, but your commitment, your discipline, your willingness to sacrifice, these are qualities that cannot be replicated by technology." "Thank you, Commander. That means a great deal."